The cabin was quiet, too quiet until her voice ripped through it like a blade. "You don't belong here." Every head in the first-class section turned. The pilot herself, uniform pressed sharp, golden stripes flashing under the overhead light, was standing in the aisle. Her finger jabbed forward, trembling not with fear but with fury, aimed squarely at the man in seat 2 amperes. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. Marcus Carter. Blue shirt, no tie, no watch glittering on his wrist. To most eyes, he was just another passenger who had wandered into the wrong cabin. But those eyes, steady, unshaken, told a different story. Behind him, 3 men in business suits leaned forward in their leather seats, eyes wide, caught between curiosity and discomfort. One of them whispered, "What's happening?" Another reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the record button. The aisle felt tighter, charged. The air itself seemed to bristle. The pilot's jaw was clenched, her words firing out like commands. "You heard me. Stand up. This seat isn't yours." Still, Marcus sat anchored, like steel bolted into the floor of the aircraft. His calm was louder than her shouting. Passengers shifted in their seats. A young woman 2 rows back mouthed the word discrimination under her breath. An older man adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to speak. Silence was stretching like a wire about to snap. Marcus drew in a slow breath. His gaze swept the cabin. Not defiant, not pleading, just steady. The kind of steady that unnerves people who think they're in control. The pilot's voice cracked sharper, desperate to reassert power. "I said you don't belong here." The words slammed into the leather walls, bounced against the oval windows, and landed heavy in the chest of every witness. And still, Marcus stayed seated. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now back to Marcus. He raised his eyes from the floor, meeting hers with quiet fire. No words yet. No motion. Just that look, calm, unshaken, dangerous in its patience. In that moment, the cabin wasn't just an airplane. It was a stage, a courtroom, a battleground where the first strike had already been thrown. And everyone knew the next move would decide everything. The cabin still buzzed with the echo of her words. Passengers sat frozen, unsure if they had just witnessed airline protocol or open prejudice. Marcus Carter didn't shift an inch. His breathing was even, slow, deliberate. He had dressed intentionally plain that morning. A light blue shirt, pressed but simple, dark slacks, no designer cufflinks, no polished Rolex flashing under the lights. To anyone glancing quickly, he could have been a middle manager catching a flight after a long week, not a billionaire with boardroom keys to the very company operating this jet. That was the point. For weeks, he had read the complaints, whispers of first-class passengers being judged, downgraded, reassigned by staff who decided who looked the part and who didn't. None of the stories made headlines. They were brushed aside as policy misunderstandings. But Marcus knew better. He had built an empire on recognizing patterns, and this one stank of the same quiet bias he had fought his whole life. So he bought his ticket under his real name. No assistants, no entourage. Just Marcus Carter, seat 2 amperes. A test. And now the test was playing out exactly as he predicted. The pilot's eyes flicked to the torn boarding pass in her hand, then back to him. She expected a protest, maybe begging, maybe anger. Instead, she was met with stillness. That stillness made her uneasy. 2 rows back, a young trainee flight attendant shifted nervously. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but the senior staff's authority weighed down like iron. She stayed silent, phone gripped tight in her pocket. Marcus leaned back slightly, letting the leather seat frame him. His mind drifted for a split second, not away from the confrontation, but backward through time. He remembered being 25, boarding a regional flight in Dallas. He wore his best suit, brand new, paid with his first real paycheck. A flight attendant back then had said the same words, "Not the image we want up front." He had swallowed the sting, taken his assigned seat in the back, and carried that humiliation into every deal he closed for the next 20 years. Now, here it was again. Different uniform, same dismissal. A passenger cleared his throat loudly, trying to cut the tension. Another whispered, "This feels wrong." The cabin was shifting, not just in sound but in atmosphere, like static before a storm. Marcus's gaze returned to the pilot. Calm, grounded, dangerous. He hadn't spoken yet, but his silence was speaking louder than anything else in the room, and deep down, she knew this wasn't over. The silence didn't last. A voice cracked through the cabin, smug and sharp. "Sir, maybe you should move before this gets unpleasant." It came from the aisle, Brian Foster, a younger flight attendant with a smirk carved onto his face. He leaned on the seatback like he owned it, his badge swinging, his eyes sweeping Marcus from head to toe. Jeans last season, shoes too plain, no status tags dangling from his bag. To Brian, the math was simple, not first-class material. Before Marcus could respond, a couple stepped forward from the galley curtain. Richard and Laura Bennett, Platinum Medallion members, champagne glasses still in hand. Richard's voice carried the weight of entitlement. "Is this really necessary?" he said to the pilot. "We paid for a premium experience. We shouldn't have to wait while this is sorted out." Laura's eyes flicked toward Marcus, quick and cutting, before she settled comfortably beside her husband. "Maybe he meant to book economy," she added, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The pilot tightened her grip on the torn boarding pass. Authority wrapped around her like armor. "This seat was reassigned. Security will be notified if you don't comply." A ripple moved through the rows. A mother pulled her child closer. An older man in a gray blazer muttered, "Unbelievable," yet no one intervened. The weight of the uniforms, the medallion tags, the official tone, it pressed people into silence. Brian's smirk widened. He reached out and tapped the armrest beside Marcus, as if to claim the space. "Come on, man. Don't make it worse for yourself. You know this isn't your lane." Marcus remained still, anchored, his calm sharper than any retort. His eyes drifted briefly toward the trainee flight attendant near the galley. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her phone, torn between obedience and conscience. The Bennetts sank into the empty seat across the aisle, sipping their drinks as if the matter was already resolved. Laura crossed her legs, a performance of elegance, and whispered to her husband, "Policy works for a reason." The words weren't meant for Marcus, but they carried. Every passenger nearby heard them, and every passenger knew exactly what reason meant. The cabin was no longer neutral air. It was charged, humming, waiting for the next crack of lightning. The pilot took a step closer, her voice slicing through the tension. "Last chance. Stand up or you'll be removed from this aircraft." Still, Marcus didn't move, and in that moment, the power she thought she held began quietly, invisibly to slip. Marcus didn't speak. The torn boarding pass fluttered in the pilot's fist like a flag of false victory, but he didn't reach for it. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply sat, spine straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes locked on hers as if he had all the time in the world. That silence unsettled the cabin more than shouting ever could. Passengers fidgeted in their seats. One man cleared his throat, too loud for the quiet. A woman clutched her pearl necklace like a shield. Even the Bennetts, who moments earlier had been smug in their entitlement, shifted uneasily as Marcus refused to play the role they had scripted for him. The angry man, the out-of-place intruder, the problem to be removed. Instead, he gave them nothing. Brian, the young flight attendant, scoffed and shook his head. "See? He's not even defending himself. Guilty as charged." He laughed, a sound that rang cheap in the pressurized air. But Marcus's stillness spoke louder than any defense. It said, "I don't need your approval. I don't need your permission. I am not here to convince you of my worth." The trainee near the galley glanced around nervously. Her hand brushed her phone again, thumb hovering over the screen. She wanted to capture this, to prove what she saw, but something in Marcus's calm made her hesitate, as if his restraint was its own form of testimony. The pilot exhaled sharply, her patience thinning. She leaned closer, her shadow falling over Marcus's seat. "Sir, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Still no answer. He sat like stone, like an anchor at the bottom of the sea, immovable, undeniable, and terrifying to those who mistook silence for weakness. A murmur rippled through the rows. "Why isn't he saying anything?" someone whispered. Another answered, "Maybe because he doesn't have to." The words hovered, fragile but true. Marcus inhaled once, steady, and let the breath out slow. His eyes traveled briefly to the oval window beside him, where night was pressing against glass. To anyone watching, it looked like a simple glance. But inside, memory unspooled another night, another rejection, another gate where he had been told the same thing in different words. "You don't belong here." That memory flickered like lightning behind his calm expression, but he didn't let it surface. Not yet. The cabin tightened. The silence became unbearable, yet Marcus held it, controlled it, wielded it, until the truth could no longer be ignored. The silence cracked not from Marcus, but from behind him. A soft click echoed in the cabin. A passenger 2 rows back, a young man in a gray hoodie with earbuds hanging loose, had lifted his phone. The red dot glowed, recording. His eyes were wide, unsettled, but steady enough to hold the lens on what everyone else was too afraid to name. "This is discrimination," he muttered, barely above a whisper. His seatmate, a woman with short blonde hair, nodded grimly. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered back, though her voice carried farther than she meant. The words spread like sparks in dry air. Heads turned, bodies shifted. People who had tried to pretend it was just protocol were now watching more closely, eyes narrowing, lips tightening. The pilot noticed. Her jaw stiffened. Phones down. No recordings allowed during boarding, but the red dot kept glowing. A middle-aged man in a blazer leaned forward from row 4, frowning. "He showed a ticket, didn't he? Why are we still here?" Brian, the smirking flight attendant, jumped in quickly. "Because the ticket wasn't valid. Simple as that. Now let's move on." His tone was clipped, rehearsed, the kind used to shut down arguments before they grew legs. But the young man with the phone shook his head. "I saw it scan green." His voice was louder this time. "I saw it. It was real." The cabin tightened again. Doubt had entered the room, and doubt was contagious. Laura Bennett, clutching her champagne glass like a prop, tried to laugh it off. "You don't know what you saw. Staff knows better than passengers." But her laugh fell flat, too forced, too hollow. The trainee flight attendant near the galley bit her lip hard enough to whiten it. Her eyes darted from Marcus to the phone to the pilot. Every fiber in her wanted to step forward, to say something, but she froze under the weight of hierarchy, caught in the gravity of silence. Marcus still hadn't spoken. His calm had become the backdrop against which everyone else revealed themselves. Arrogance, cruelty, courage, cowardice. He didn't need to accuse anyone, the cabin was accusing itself. The phone's red dot glowed brighter in the minds of everyone who saw it. Proof was being born in real time. And with proof came pressure. The pilot's voice snapped, louder this time. "Sir, if you don't stand up right now, security will remove you. Final warning." But her words no longer carried the same authority, not with witnesses, not with cameras, not with truth seeping into the open. And still Marcus did not move. The pilot straightened her shoulders, her voice colder now, stripped of patience. "This seat has been reassigned. You need to vacate it immediately." Her words dropped like a verdict. No trial, no defense, just judgment. Marcus didn't flinch. His calm only sharpened the edge of her tone, made her sound less in control and more desperate to be. Brian, the young attendant, seized the moment. He leaned closer, voice dripping mockery. "Look, man, first class isn't for everybody. You don't need to make a scene. Economy's right there." He jerked his thumb toward the curtain like it was a back door for the unworthy. A few passengers gasped. One woman muttered, "That's out of line." Another raised her phone higher, camera now openly pointed. Richard Bennett, still lounging in the opposite seat, chimed in with authority he hadn't earned. "Captain, maybe security should step in. We can't let one passenger delay everyone else." His wife Laura nodded eagerly, adding, "We have real business to attend to. He's wasting time." The pilot's jaw tightened. She lifted the torn boarding pass higher, as if it were evidence. "This is not valid," she declared, her voice raised so the entire cabin could hear. "And unless you comply, you will be escorted off this aircraft under FAA regulation." The words FAA regulation hung in the air like a threat wrapped in legality. Some passengers wavered, shifting uneasily, unsure if the uniform meant truth or just power. The young man with the phone shook his head again, louder this time. "It was valid. I saw it. You tore it up." Murmurs rippled down the aisle. A middle-aged woman near the window whispered, "She destroyed the proof." Another replied, "Because she's hiding something." The pilot ignored them, focusing all her authority on Marcus. Her voice cracked sharper. "Sir, this is your last warning. Stand up, or security will handle it." Still no movement. Brian scoffed, louder now, playing to the crowd. "He doesn't belong here. You can tell just by looking at him." The words landed heavy, racism stripped of disguise, audible for every passenger to hear. The trainee by the galley froze, eyes wide. Her grip on her phone trembled. She had heard enough, and the cabin, once quiet, was no longer neutral ground. It was a courtroom, and every witness knew the truth was tilting. Marcus's silence still held, but tension was about to snap. The tension snapped. With one sharp motion, the pilot raised the torn boarding pass higher and ripped it clean down the middle. The sound was small, paper against paper, but in the pressurized cabin it exploded like thunder. Gasps rippled through the rows. One passenger covered her mouth. Another cursed under his breath. "This is done," the pilot barked. "You are not authorized to sit here." Brian smirked, emboldened. He stepped closer, his arm brushing against Marcus's shoulder as if to herd him out of the seat. "Time's up, man! Don't make us drag you!" That single touch changed the air. Phones tilted higher. Screens lit up. A dozen silent witnesses became a dozen recorders. The hum of electronics layered with the rising pulse of injustice. Laura Bennett leaned forward in her seat, her champagne glass trembling slightly, but her voice still sharp. "Finally, this is ridiculous. Just remove him already," Richard added. "This kind of delay is unacceptable. Some of us actually belong here." The trainee near the galley flinched at the words, eyes darting to Marcus. Her lips parted. She wanted to speak, but the weight of rank, the presence of the captain, held her down. Marcus remained unmoved. The brush of Brian's arm might as well have been air. His stillness was defiance. His silence was indictment. The pilot pulled out her radio. Her voice, clipped and hard, carried across the cabin. "Security to Gate B, 17. We have a non-compliant passenger refusing to vacate a reassigned seat." The call was official. It was loud. It was designed not just to summon authority, but to humiliate. A woman in row 5 shook her head. "Non-compliant? He hasn't even spoken." Another passenger muttered, "She just tore up his ticket. Who's non-compliant here?" The cabin was fracturing, half still cowed by uniforms and procedure, half waking to the injustice unraveling in plain sight. Brian leaned in closer, his voice low but meant to sting. "You hear that? They're coming. Hope you like handcuffs." The words, ugly and venomous, dropped like oil into fire. And yet Marcus didn't rise, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of fear. He sat steady, as if rooted deeper than any threat could reach. And in that stillness, power was shifting, though they hadn't realized it yet. The radio crackled back with static, but Marcus finally moved. Not to stand, not to protest. He reached calmly into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. One tap, one breath. His voice, steady as stone. "Rachel, log this. Activate protocol." Across the line, his assistant's reply was instant, crisp, professional. "Understood, Mr. Carter. Incident recorded. Protocol engaged." The cabin didn't know what protocol meant, but they felt it. The way his words didn't waver. The way his calm grew heavier, more commanding, as if a courtroom had just been summoned inside 30,000 pounds of steel. Brian blinked, caught off guard. "Who the hell are you calling?" Marcus didn't answer him. His phone stayed pressed to his ear. His gaze stayed locked on the pilot, who suddenly shifted, uncertain for the first time. Rachel's voice came through again, sharp enough to cut the rising noise in the cabin. "Mr. Carter, confirmation complete. Every second since boarding has been logged. Multiple witness feeds already sinking to the boardroom." The word boardroom landed like a stone in water. The ripples traveled fast. Passengers leaned forward. Whispers surged. One man muttered, "Boardroom?" Another asked, "Who is this guy?" Laura Bennett scoffed, but her voice cracked as she tried to laugh. "Oh, please. He's bluffing." But the bluff didn't look like this. Marcus lowered the phone slightly, just enough for his words to fill the air. "You've made your call. Now I've made mine. Let's see which one carries more weight." The pilot froze. Her authority, moments ago wrapped around her like armor, suddenly felt thin. Too thin. Brian shifted back, the smugness slipping. "What's protocol?" he asked. But the question was more to himself than anyone else. The trainee near the galley gripped her phone tighter. She had never seen a passenger sit so still, so certain, in the face of escalating power. It was no longer silence, it was strategy. Marcus leaned back, phone still in hand, calm, radiating like heat from steel. His voice dropped, almost too quiet, but every syllable carried. "You think you control this flight? You don't even control your future." Gasps threaded through the cabin. Passengers looked at one another, eyes wide. Something had shifted, something irreversible. And for the first time since this began, the crew wasn't just facing a passenger. They were facing power. The cabin was holding its breath. Every eye locked on Marcus. The pilot still gripped the torn boarding pass like a weapon, but her hand had started to tremble. Brian's smirk was gone, replaced with something smaller, tighter doubt. Even the Bennetts, still clutching their champagne, leaned forward as if their entitlement alone could shield them from what they felt coming. Marcus finally moved. He lowered the phone completely, slipped it into his pocket, and rose slow, deliberate, unhurried. The leather seat hissed as he stood. His full height filled the aisle. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "My name," he said, every syllable crisp, "is Marcus Carter." Silence. He let it hang, heavy as stone, before continuing. "I'm the CEO of Horizon Aviation. I'm the largest shareholder of the airline that owns this aircraft." The words detonated in the cabin. Gasps erupted. A woman in row 4 clutched her husband's arm. Someone whispered, "No way." Another voice cracked, "Did he just say CEO?" The young man recording zoomed in, his phone trembling with adrenaline. "Oh my God, this is real." The pilot blinked, her authority shattering like glass under pressure. What?" Her voice wavered. That's not possible." Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on hers. "You tore up the ticket of your own employer. You accused the owner of fraud. And you tried to drag me out of a seat I paid for twice over, once as a customer, and once as the man who signs your checks." Brian stumbled back a step. His badge swung wildly as his face drained of color. That can't be true." But Rachel's voice came alive again through the speaker of his phone, loud enough for everyone to hear this time. "Mr. Carter, your ownership credentials are verified and synced. The boardroom is watching live. Authorization protocols are active." The confirmation was undeniable. Phones lifted higher. Screens glowed brighter. Passengers whispered, some in shock, some in satisfaction. The truth wasn't just spoken, it was documented, captured, immortalized in real time. Laura Bennett tried to scoff, but the sound caught in her throat. If that's true, then... She didn't finish. Richard put a hand on her arm, his face pale. Marcus took a step forward into the aisle, his presence alone enough to make space. His voice stayed low, but carried through every row. "You told me I don't belong here. But here's the truth. This cabin belongs to me. This plane belongs to me. And right now, every one of you is about to see what that really means." The cabin wasn't silent anymore. It was alive, buzzing, electrified, on the edge of eruption. And the balance of power had shifted completely. The reveal detonated like a bomb in the cabin. The pilot's face drained of color. Her knuckles, still clutching the shredded boarding pass, turned white. The uniform that had been her armor moments ago now felt like a costume, thin, brittle, useless. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Brian staggered back, palms open, as if he could physically push away the truth. I didn't know," he stammered. His eyes darted to the passengers, then back to Marcus, searching for a way out. There wasn't one. Richard Bennett's mouth hung open, his bravado cracked in half. He looked to his wife for backup, but Laura only stared at her glass of champagne, hands trembling too much to lift it. Their arrogance had evaporated, leaving only shame. The young man with the phone whispered into his live stream, voice trembling with adrenaline. "Guys, you're watching this live. He's the CEO. The CEO." Comments scrolled across his screen so fast he couldn't keep up. Thousands of viewers now watching. Thousands of witnesses beyond the cabin walls. From the back of the cabin, a passenger clapped once. The sound was sharp, defiant. Another joined. Then another. Soon, a ripple of applause moved forward like a wave, rolling past Marcus until it filled the entire first-class section. The pilot flinched at the sound, as though each clap was a strike. Her authority was dissolving in real time, not just by Marcus's revelation, but by the cabin itself. The people she thought were bystanders now turned jury. The trainee near the galley finally stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her courage was undeniable. "He's telling the truth," she said, louder than before. "His name is in the system. I saw it when I logged in this morning. Marcus Carter, owner access. I didn't say anything because..." Her voice broke. "Because I was afraid." The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. Marcus looked at her, not with anger, but with something steadier recognition. She wasn't an enemy, she was a witness, and now she was an ally. Laura Bennett tried one last time to salvage her composure. This can't be how things work. A passenger can't just..." But Marcus cut her off without raising his voice. "A passenger? I'm not a passenger. I'm the man who built the very airline that carried you here. Remember that before you decide who belongs." Gasps again. Phones lifted higher, and the applause swelled until even the skeptical had no choice but to join. The cabin wasn't just watching anymore. It was testifying. And for the pilot, for Brian, for every smug word that had been spoken, Judgment Day had arrived. The applause still echoed when Marcus raised his hand. The clapping died down, not from command, but from gravity. The room knew he was about to speak. His voice was steady, steel wrapped in calm. "This flight doesn't move another inch until I say so." The words fell heavy, undeniable. The pilot opened her mouth, but Marcus lifted his phone again. One tap. The line was live. "Rachel," he said evenly, "initiate flight hold." Her reply was immediate, amplified by the speaker. "Confirmed. Gate control has been notified. Horizon Flight 227 is grounded until further authorization." A collective gasp surged through the cabin. Passengers leaned into the aisles, wide-eyed. The authority of the pilot had just been eclipsed, overridden at the highest level. Marcus's gaze returned to the crew. "Captain," he said, his voice sharp but quiet, "you've violated your duty, disgraced your uniform, and attempted to humiliate the very man who ensures your paycheck clears." He took a step closer, his presence towering. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of command." Her breath caught. You can't. Watch me." Rachel's voice cut through the phone again. "Captain Reynolds, your credentials are suspended. Access revoked. Please surrender your badge and return to ground control." The pilot's badge buzzed red. In her hand, the once indestructible symbol of authority flickered useless. Her lips parted, but no words came. Marcus turned to Brian. "You thought mockery was power. It wasn't. You're finished." Rachel's voice echoed once more. "Flight attendant Brian Foster removed from Horizon System. Effective immediately." Brian's face drained. His badge, too, buzzed red. He staggered back, shaking his head. No, please, I didn't." But Marcus's stare cut him down. No pleading could undo what was already done. Then he turned to the rest of the crew, his voice carrying through the cabin like a gavel striking wood. "Any staff complicit in this humiliation is done, as of now." The trainee flinched, fear flashing, but Marcus's eyes softened slightly when they met hers. "Not you," he said. "You spoke truth. That takes courage. Remember that." The relief on her face trembled like a fragile flame, but it was real. The passengers erupted, some cheering, some filming, all witnesses to a justice delivered instantly, decisively. Marcus lowered his phone. His words landed with finality. "This plane doesn't move with liars in the cockpit. Tonight, it only moves with truth." And in that moment, the hierarchy of the cabin had been rewritten. The cabin was still humming cheers, whispers, the constant glow of phone cameras, but Marcus stood unmoved at the center of it all. He didn't need the noise. He had already won. The pilot sat slumped in her seat, badge dead, uniform stripped of meaning. Brian leaned against the galley wall, pale and silent, the smirk that once cut so sharp erased completely. The Bennetts had shrunk into their leather seats, their champagne untouched, their pride curdling into shame. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the rows of passengers. Every eye followed him, some in awe, some in disbelief, all in recognition of what they had just seen. He spoke, not loud, but the cabin hushed as if the very air leaned in to hear. "You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake." The words landed like a gavel strike. Passengers nodded. A woman in the back whispered, "Yes." Another man muttered, "That's power." Marcus continued, "I don't need to raise my voice. I don't need to beg for dignity, because dignity isn't given, it's owned. And I own it. Here, now, always." The young man with the phone was still live, tears of adrenaline in his eyes. "You guys hearing this?" He breathed into the camera. Comments flooded in applause, emojis, fists, fire. A global audience had become witnesses, too. Marcus glanced at him briefly, then back to the cabin. "You called me out in front of strangers. You tried to erase me with paper and words, but paper tears. Words fade. Truth doesn't." He let the silence stretch, let the truth hang in the air like a verdict that could never be overturned. Then he finished. "I don't need to record proof. I am the proof." Phones dropped to laps, but not out of disrespect, out of reverence. The passengers weren't just watching anymore. They were absorbing, carrying the weight of what had been said. Marcus eased back into his seat, calm as if none of it had rattled him. He tapped his phone one last time. "Rachel, clear the flight. Replace the crew. And tell operations this jet flies tonight, but only with truth in the cockpit." Confirmed, Mr. Carter, came the reply. The cabin exhaled as one. Somewhere deep in the fuselage, systems reset, badges revoked, access gone, justice delivered. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, not to escape the moment, but to seal it. He had been told all his life, in boardrooms, in hotels, at gates, on flights, "You don't belong here." Tonight, he had answered for the last time, and the world inside the cabin and far beyond would not forget it.